Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're heading way back, early Cretaceous Australia, to be specific. We're going to dig into the story of Atlascopcosaurus.
Sounds great. It's a fascinating one.
Yeah, we've got quite a bit here, the science, the discovery details, what we, well, think it looked like.
And the debates, too, which are always interesting in paleontology.
Exactly. And that's our mission today. Pull out the key stuff about this dinosaur, what makes it unique, get into the science discussion, but without getting totally bogged down.
Right. Keep it focused.
And there's this kind of surprising twist involving a tool company.
Yes. That connection is quite unusual. It really shows how different fields can overlap sometimes, unexpectedly.
So let's start at the beginning, the discovery.
Okay, so the key moment was 1984. The place. Dinosaur Cove East, down in Victoria, Australia.
And this wasn't just digging in sand, right? It was rock.
Oh, yeah. Hard rock. It's part of the Umarella Formation, which dates to the early Cretaceous. We're talking Aptian-Albian stages.
Now, for people listening who aren't geology buffs, why is that particular formation, Umarella, important?
Well, it's basically a snapshot of life in Australia during that specific time. And what's really key is, back then, Australia was way further south, much closer to Antarctica.
So colder.
Definitely colder than today. So the fossils we find there, they give us this amazing window into life, adapting to, polar or near polar conditions, even with forests.
Ah, okay. And Dinosaur Cove East specifically.
That site became crucial because that initial dig back in '84, it yielded like 85 fossil bone fragments. Not just one thing, but bits from various species.
85 pieces right off the bat.
Yeah. So that immediately suggested, okay, there's probably a lot more here. It justified putting in some serious effort.
Which leads us neatly to the name, Atlascopcosaurus. It sounds industrial.
It absolutely is. The genus name is a direct shout out to the Atlas Copco company. The big Swedish firm that makes compressors, mining gear, industrial tools.
Right. So what was their connection? How did they get involved with bigging up dinosaurs?
Well, after that first find, it became clear that getting more fossils out of that cliff face was going to be a huge job. We're talking tunneling into rock.
Tunneling. Wow.
Exactly. So over the next 10 years or so, Atlas Copco and some other companies too actually provided the heavy-duty equipment needed. Drills, tunneling gear.
No kidding. They helped dig the tunnel.
They did. They helped excavate something like 60 meters of tunnels straight into the cliff by the sea. Imagine that effort. Without their help, it would have been incredibly difficult, maybe impossible.
That's amazing. A tool company helping unearth dinosaurs. It's quite the story.
It really is a fantastic example of collaboration.
And the species name, Lodesai, that's specific too.
Yes, that honors William Loades. He was the state manager for Atlas Copco in Victoria around the time of the discovery. Apparently, he was instrumental in arranging that assistance.
So it acknowledges the company and the individual who helped make it happen.
Precisely. It puts a human face on the discovery process, which is nice.
Okay, so we know where it was found, how the dig happened, thanks to some serious horsepower, and who got the naming honors. But what about the dinosaur itself? What did Atlascopcosaurus look like?
Well, this is where things get a little more interpretive, as often happens.
Fragmentary evidence.
Very much so. The holotype that's the single specimen used as the main reference for the species is just a piece of the upper jaw, a partial maxilla with some teeth still in it.
Just a jaw piece. Okay.
Yeah. And then we have what are called referred specimens. These are other fossils found nearby that scientists think belong to the same species. So more teeth, maybe another bit of maxilla, and some parts of the lower jaw of the dentaries.
So it's all concentrated around the mouth, basically. Jaws and teeth.
That's the bulk of it, yes. The rest of the skeleton, totally unknown so far.
So how do we even guess what the rest of it looked like?
Good question. Paleontologists have to look at its closest relatives, or what we think are its closest relatives, for which we do have more complete skeletons.
Yeah.
Based on those comparisons.
You sort of fill in the gaps.
Kind of, yeah. You infer. The general consensus is that Atlascopcosaurus was likely a fairly small bipedal herbivore.
Walked on two legs, ate plants.
Exactly. Standard small ornithopod body plan, most likely.
And can we estimate size from just jaw fragments? Seems tricky.
It is, but you can extrapolate. By comparing the size of the jaw and teeth to those of more complete relatives, you can make an educated guess. The estimates put it somewhere around, say, 2 to 3 meters long.
So roughly 6.5 to 10 feet.
Yeah, about that. And maybe weighing around 125 kilograms. give or take.
Okay, about 275 pounds, so not huge like a T-Rex, but not tiny either. A
Yeah.
decent size for its environment.
Exactly. A noticeable part of that early Cretaceous Australian ecosystem.
Right, so we have this picture forming. A two-legged plant eater, maybe 10 feet long, roaming a cool, forested Australia. Now let's get into the classification debates you mentioned. Its place on the family tree wasn't straightforward.
Not at all. And this is where the science gets really interesting and sometimes a bit contentious. So when it was first described in 1989 by Tom Rich and Patricia Vickers-Rich, they placed it in the family Hypsilophodontidae.
Hypsilophodontidae, what kind of dinosaurs were they thought to be?
At the time, Hypsilophodontidae was kind of a catch-all group for various small, speedy, bipedal ornithopods. Think of Hypsilophodon itself from England. Small, agile herbivores.
Okay, so initially it was grouped with those guys. What changed?
Well, dinosaur science moves fast.
Right.
As we found more fossils, especially more complete ones, and did more detailed analyses, cladistics, looking at shared features, our understanding of how these ornithopods were related really shifted.
Right, the old categories didn't hold up.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That concept of Hypsilophodontidae as a single natural family group, it kind of fell apart. It was shown to be what we call paraphyletic, meaning it didn't include all descendants of a common ancestor. So that original classification for Atlascopcosaurus was eventually considered untenable.
Untenable. Strong word in science.
It is. This was noted in the second edition of the Dinosauria, which is a huge authoritative book series on dinosaurs. So Atlascopcosaurus got moved out of that specific family and placed more generally within the larger group Ornithopoda.
So still an ornithopod, a bird-hipped, mostly plant-eating dinosaur, but not necessarily a close cousin to Hypsilophodon anymore.
Exactly. But the story doesn't end there. The debate continued.
Oh, what else?
Well, in 2010, a study came out by Agnelin and colleagues. They took a hard look at the actual Atlascopcosaurus fossils, those jaw fragments and teeth, and they argued that, honestly, the teeth aren't unique enough. They don't have clear, distinct features, what we call autapomorphies, that reliably separate them from other related dinosaurs.
So the teeth could belong to something else, or they just aren't special enough to define a new genus.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And they felt the maxilla fragment itself was also too limited. So they actually proposed that Atlascopcosaurus lotzi should be considered a nomen dubium.
A nomen dubium. Meaning?
A doubtful name. Basically, they were saying the original specimen isn't good enough to confidently assign other fossils to, or even be sure it represents a distinct, valid species based only on that material.
Wow. Questioning its very existence as a valid scientific name, that's a big deal.
It is. Though, interestingly, they did note it shared some similarities with a couple of small ornithopods from Patagonia in South America, Anabasatia and Gasparinosaura.
South America. That's interesting geographically. But okay, so one study says doubtful name. Was that the final word?
Not quite. Science marches on. Just 5 years later, in 2015, another researcher, Boyd, took another look.
And reached a different conclusion, I'm guessing.
You guessed right. Boyd argued that, no, the genus is valid. Based on his analysis, he placed Atlascopcosaurus near the base of a more advanced group of ornithopods called Iguanodontia.
Iguanodontia, like iguanodon.
Related, yeah. It's a big group that includes Iguanodon and the duck-billed dinosaurs, but Atlascopcosaurus would be way down near the evolutionary base of that branch.
Okay. And did Boyd agree about the South American connection?
He did, actually. His analysis also suggested it formed a group, a clade, with those Patagonian dinosaurs, Anabasatia and Gasparinosaura, and also with another Australian dinosaur named Quantasaurus, which, funnily enough, was named after the airline Qantas.
Okay. Australia really has some uniquely named dinosaurs.
They certainly do. Quantasaurus was found nearby, too.
So we have this clear split, one view, maybe not enough evidence, nomen dubium, another view valid, and part of this early iguanodontian group potentially linking Australia and South America. Why such different takes?
It really boils down to how different scientists interpret the same limited evidence. How much weight do you give to subtle features on teeth? How do you interpret the bits of jawbone we have? Without more of the skeleton? Well, there's room for differing exhibit opinions.
It really shows how paleontology is like detective work with only a few clues.
Absolutely. You build the strongest case you can with what you have, but new evidence or new analysis methods can change the picture.
Okay, just to lock it in, can we run through the full classification again? Just the hierarchy.
Sure. So broadly, domain, Eukaryota.
Right. Cells with a nucleus.
Kingdom, Animalia.
Animals.
Phylum, Chordata.
Spinal cord.
Clade, Dinosauria.
All dinosaurs.
Clade, Ornithicia.
The bird-hipped ones, mostly herbivores.
then clade ornithopoda.
The group Atlascopcosaurus definitely belongs in, one way or another.
Right. And then currently debated but often listed, genus Atlascopcosaurus and the single species Alodsi. And that little dagger means extinct.
Perfect. Okay, so wrapping this up, what are the main takeaways from our deep dive on Atlascopcosaurus?
Well, I think first it's this picture of a small two-legged plant eater living in a pretty unique, cool climate Australian environment back in the early Cretaceous.
Right, known mostly from those jaw and teeth fragments.
Exactly. Second, there's that amazing naming story, isn't there? Honoring the Atlas Copco Company and William Loades for their absolutely crucial help in the excavation. A real industry science link.
Definitely memorable.
And third, I'd say it's the ongoing scientific conversation. The fact that its precise spot on the dinosaur family tree is still debated really highlights how science works, especially when you're dealing with fossils that don't give you the whole picture. It shows the challenges and the constant refinement of our understanding.
It's a great case study in how knowledge gets built, piece by piece, and sometimes reassessed. That link between a modern company and this ancient creature is just fascinating.
It really is. And it leads to a final thought perhaps for you listening. How often do stories like this happen? Think about how the discovery and especially the naming of ancient life, like Atlascopcosaurus, can reflect more than just the science.
You mean like reflecting the circumstances of the find, the people involved, the technology available, even corporate support?
Exactly. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other stories, what other connections to human endeavor, industry, or just individual effort might be hidden away in the scientific names of creatures from deep time?